So you might be wondering a little bit what I'm going to be talking about because the title of the talk is Embracing the F Word. We're going to be talking about feminism. Yeah, which might not be my favorite F word, but it's definitely up there. And it looks like we're talking about bad words, right? And we're not talking about the Bad Words Project that the pro-life icon Paige Kubinka developed while she was an intern with us 3 summers ago. No, we're talking about pro-life feminism, because in feminist circles, the word pro-life is seen as like a 4-letter word, right? You say it in hushed tones. You can't say pro-life. You have got to be talking about those anti-choice bigots, right? If you're in feminist circles. Or if you're in pro-life circles, the word feminist is a word you kind of usher out of the room because it's not acceptable to be feminist, because it's just presumed that if you're feminist that you support the legal right to kill your preborn children. And so we're kind of in this awkward space where we're in tension in the pro-life movement and in the feminist movement. And so we're trying to figure out where our space is in both of these places. And you might be a little uncomfortable. You might be hey, I'm not a huge fan of the word feminism. It makes my skin crawl a little bit. I'm super uncomfortable with the insinuation that we might have feminists in this movement. I am hoping that by the end of this presentation, y'all can see that the word feminism is not nearly as scary as some might have you believe. So to give you a little background on myself, right, so it's already introduced. My name is Aimee Murphy with Rehumanize International. I founded the organization when I was 22 years old, right out of college. Because I knew that I couldn't be done doing pro-life work, even though I had graduated and was done with Students for Life. And it was only, about 6 years that I had been involved in pro-life activism. When I was 16 years old, I had this conversion to life. And it started when I was probably about 14 or 15. And I was in this place of really searching for love and affection and trying to figure out who I was in the world. I knew that I was attracted to women, but I also was well, that's not what my parents have told me is good and right. And so I was just sleeping around with a bunch of people. And I left behind the faith that my parents tried to teach me. And I ended up in this on-again, off-again relationship with one guy in particular. And after being together for probably about 3 months was the longest time we were together, I eventually told him that I wasn't comfortable sleeping with him anymore, that we really needed to take 6 steps back and reevaluate. So he broke up with me, so we all know what he was after, right? Which is rather uncomfortable for me to consider now. That was January. February comes and Valentine's Day is upon my doorstep, and I'm upset about it, but it's fine. But I get a call from this ex of mine, and he's crying. He's so upset. He's so sad. And he's I'm delivering flowers for a family friend, and I'm so lonely. And I'm oh, sounds like your problem. You're the one who broke up with me. Don't you remember that? But being the nice person, the kind person that I am, the compassionate person that I am, I was hey, you can come over and we'll just sit on the front porch and talk, right? And that literally was all I expected to happen. So I'm sitting out on the front porch. Of course, can't go inside with him because my parents have a very strict rule: no boys in the house if they are not home. So I'm sitting on the front porch, and I actually I'm waiting on a diagnosis for this condition called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means that when I stand up from sitting or laying down, I go into what's called presyncope, which means my body gets ready to faint, and I lose my vision. I can't really sense what's happening anymore, and my hearing often will start ringing. And so that's what happened to me that day. Like, I heard him pull up into our driveway and close the door. I stand up. The next thing I know, he is on top of me. And he raped me on the front porch that day. And I tried to, say no and push him off, and it didn't work. So our relationship was like over at that point, right? Like, we don't talk for months. And March goes by, April comes, and I haven't had a period in several months. So I'm just like, fuck, my favorite F word, right? What if I am pregnant by my rapist? I'm panicking. And the only thing that is on my mind is abortion, right? Like, I was pro-choice at the time, grew up in California, where it was just like accepted. If you were gonna be a feminist, if you were gonna be a supporter of human rights, you were gonna support abortion. And so it was the only thing that was on my mind. Word eventually got to him that I thought I was pregnant. He came and pulled me out of class one day, and he's like, Aimee, you need to get an abortion. I'll drive you, I'll pay for it, but you need to get it taken care of. And I was just like, why are you so invested in this? And he said, well, I don't want my mom to know about what happened. And I just shook my head, looked down at the ground like I was fuming inside. And he said, Aimee, if you don't get an abortion, I might kill you. And like, the things started happening where I started having anxiety, like my fingers started getting tingly, and I was just like, you need to leave. I went back into my classroom, and my mind was just racing. I mean, my heart was racing, like my body temperature's rising, like I'm panicking, right? Like, my life was just threatened by the guy who raped me, and now, like, looking back on it, like, the entire history of our relationship was extremely abusive. And yet, in that moment where I was panicking, when my life was threatened, I knew something else too. I knew that I couldn't be like him. Because what he was telling me was, I don't respect your inherent dignity. I don't see your humanity. You're an inconvenience to me, and you're an inconvenience to my future. Therefore, I'm going to kill you. And what he was doing to me was passing on this oppression, right? Like, he was trying to force death on me, and I realized that I could not do that to another human being. And like, I had taken 9th grade biology, right? Like, I remembered that the textbook said, like, when sperm and egg meet at the moment of fertilization, a new member of that same parent species is formed. Like, I knew that. And yet, it wasn't until that moment when I felt a solidarity with a defenseless preborn child that I understood that I could not use the same cycle of oppression to achieve my own goals in life. Despite the fact that I was a straight A student, and like, my teachers were like, you're gonna head to an Ivy League school, like, you're gonna be a world changer. And I was like, okay, a baby's really gonna screw up my life right now. So in that moment, I was like, no, like, nonviolence is the way. I cannot destroy another human. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm pro-life now. That sucks. It's gonna ruin my social life. Which it did, totally did. Because not only did my friends not believe me that I had been raped by my ex, they were like, no, you're a slut and a whore. They also were like, no, pro-lifers are not welcome here. You cannot be pro-life and feminist. But I actually came to the pro-life position because of my feminist ideals, because I understood that the core of feminism is our shared human equality. So understanding that violence couldn't be the solution, I was actually drawn further into feminism. The first organization I got involved with in the pro-life movement was Feminists for Life. And here's the thing, like, as an atheist at the time, as a feminist, as someone who identified as queer, as someone who was progressive. I was like, where is my space in this movement? Where do I belong? Do they want me to be a part of the effort to end abortion or not? So I founded Rehumanize International when I got out of college. Our pro-life group in college actually was like super intersectional. It was very fascinating. We had like 3 atheists, 2 agnostics, 3 Christians, and 5 of whom were part of the LGBT community. So we were like, okay, like we're like an actual representation of like what can happen if the pro-life movement is willing to embrace diversity within our movement. And now you might be thinking, but Aimee, feminists support abortion. Like that's like the plank of feminism right now. That's like the center of what they do. You hear all these chants like, without our basic rights, women can't be free, abortion on demand and without apology, right? Like that's like, literally people are out here not just being pro-choice, it's like pro-abortion choice. Like pro-abortion, abortion's gotta be funded by the federal government, abortion's gotta be free, on demand, and available at your corner store. And I'm like, okay, well that's sort of fair that you might be saying that that's what feminism is about. However, feminism didn't start that way. Because there was a fascinating thing that occurred during the second wave of feminism, the transition between the first and second wave, where these second wave feminists were seduced by the lies and the influence of men like Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who was one of the founders of NARAL, and he helped change the meaning of the word. So now feminist is nearly synonymous with pro-choice. Because Dr. Bernard Nathanson and his pals at NARAL, a bunch of men, by the way, went to Betty Friedan. Anyone heard of Betty Friedan other than Paige? Yeah, okay. So Betty Friedan was the author of The Feminine Mystique, which always makes me think of X-Men, right? But The Feminine Mystique originally did, like the first editions, if you find any of the first editions, did not include any mention of abortion or like any reasoning whatsoever that said that women needed abortion in order to be successful. The Feminine Mystique largely was about how women deserve to be respected and deserve to have a place within the working world. That was really largely what the second wave of feminism was about. The first wave was largely about voting rights. The second wave was largely about women having a space in the working world. It wasn't until Bernard Nathanson and NARAL went to Betty Friedan and was like, hey, did you ever consider that in order for women to make it in a man's world, they need abortion? And Betty was like, I guess you're right, and added it to the book. And it really became part and parcel of second wave feminism at that point. But it wasn't until that point that feminism really embraced abortion. But I think we can embrace the F word. We can embrace feminism. Also, I just realized I'm forgetting to flip through slides. Flip through slides. Okay, this was my, sorry, there's a slide to go with my story. There's cute pictures of me at 16. I was a nerd. Anyway, so I think we can embrace feminism by returning to its roots, by understanding that feminism is a movement for the social and political and cultural equality, regardless of sex, gender identity, or other circumstantial factors. The core principles of feminism are equality, non-discrimination, and nonviolence. So let's look at those ideals just a little bit closer to dive in and see where our modern feminists went wrong in supporting abortion. So equality, it's the idea that all human beings, regardless of gender, race, religion, politics, age, size, ability, or any other circumstance, are equal in dignity, moral value, and before the law. Non-discrimination, it's the idea that the idea that any act of discrimination, whether it be sexism, racism, ageism, or ableism, or any other bad-ism, is contrary to this equal human dignity. And then nonviolence. It's really like non-discrimination put into practice. It means that every human being has a right to live free from violence. So let's do a little refresher on some 10th grade bio, right? To boil it down, the product of a same species conception is a member of the same species from the very beginning. In layman's terms, we are human beings from the very moment that sperm fuses with egg. We are not a rock or a tree or a rabbit. I had this conversation with a guy with Stop Patriarchy outside of the Supreme Court yesterday. And he was like, oh no, it's a potential human. And I was like, no, sperm and egg, before they meet, could potentially become a human. But when they meet, at the moment of sperm-egg fusion and fertilization, it becomes a member of the same parent species. And he was like, well, no, it's potential. And I was like, well, what else could it become? A giraffe? A frog? And he was like, no, you're not getting my point. And I was like, no. Read an embryology textbook. An embryo or a fetus is a classification of species, right? Like, not all fetuses are the same species. And he was like, well, all embryos look the same. And I was like, oh, okay, what's your point? Like, a human embryo is still a human embryo. A giraffe embryo is still a giraffe embryo. Just because we look the same at that stage doesn't mean we're any less human, right? This is a fascinating thing. I was like, I feel like you're discriminating against certain humans because you don't think they're attractive. I feel like you're saying that it's okay to kill certain humans because you don't think they're cute. I don't know what kind of ism that is, but like, it's certainly some form of discrimination. So fetus or embryo is a demarcation of age, because there are fetal pigs, fetal cows, fetal dolphins, and fetal humans, just to name a few. And whenever someone responds that the embryo or fetus is just a clump of cells, I feel the need to remind them that, indeed, we are all clumps of cells. Indeed, I am a large clump of cells standing in solidarity with small clumps of cells. I am out here standing for the rights of small clumps. March for clumps, guys. March for clumps. Every human is made of cells. Like everything that you can touch is made of cells. Even things that you can't touch are made of, I mean, technically speaking, you can't even, now we're getting into physics. You can't, strictly speaking, like touch another human. Like there's like, I don't know, I'm just like remembering my physics from 12th grade. And I remember my physics teacher telling me, you can't really ever touch another thing. And I was like, what? That seems strange. Anyway. So regardless of our age or our size or location or degree of dependency or gender or race or religion or nationality or sexual orientation or socioeconomic status, we all share the same inherent human dignity. We all deserve to live free from violence. And any sort of feminism that supports abortion actually reinforces structures of inequality, discrimination, and violence. Because the preborn, whether zygote, embryo, or fetus, is a human being according to all scientific measure, abortion is clearly an act of violence against this human being. Whether it's by starvation, dismemberment, or poisoning, a successful abortion always aggressively kills a human being. This is not an act of self-defense, right? Like, a child can't be an aggressor. Like, where's Henry? Oh, he's somewhere over there. Henry's not an aggressor, guys. And babies smaller than him are also not aggressors. That's not how it works. And we can see that because violence is an act of discrimination, it creates this structure of inequality. Because what it does is it says that because women are larger, bigger, usually smarter, cuter or, I don't know, less dependent or more able-bodied, that it's okay for these stronger people to discriminate and kill smaller people. Abortion is directly contrary to the core principles of feminism. In truth, when you examine the issue of abortion against the core tenets of feminism, the better question, in my opinion, is whether you can be pro-choice and feminist. To be pro-life for every human being at all stages, in all circumstances, seems to me to be the only possible conclusion for feminism, rightly understood. To compound the inequality perpetuated by our abortion culture is pregnancy and maternity stigma. My friend was actually pregnant here. You can't really tell by the photo, but it was really cute. She was holding the sign, "End pregnancy discrimination, not a child's life." Because not only is there discrimination against the preborn, but also against their mothers. There is a lie perpetuated by the abortion industry and pro-choice proponents, even though they might not say it so outright, that we often hear, usually indirectly. And this is, again, that lie perpetuated by Dr. Nathanson and his NARAL pals. By the way, Dr. Nathanson became pro-life. He was an icon. Like, read his book, look up the videos that he did later to, like, debunk all the myths that he helped spread when he founded NARAL. Anyway, there's this lie that we hear that says women cannot be successful or liberated without the right to abortion. But these folks are more or less implying, in order to be empowered, women must have the legal right to kill their children. This is a falsehood that lies in the patriarchal structures which insist that the wombless male body is the default. Think about it. If men's bodies are the norm within our culture, if women have to make it in a men's world, then it implies that anyone who would try to seek a career or make it in academia would need to have the ability to be free from the responsibility of bearing children. If men's bodies are the norm, then pregnancy is a disease condition, right? Like, it's wrong, it's not correct for a man's body to be pregnant. And if men's bodies are the norm, then it seems that women must be just like them in order to be successful. And to say that women must be just like men is not respecting the unique characteristics of women. It is not true equality to require that women must give up that unique life-giving capacity in order to be successful. It is submitting to the structure of the patriarchy to perpetuate the idea that mothers are inherently disempowered, that they cannot achieve their dreams and goals without the right to kill their children. This is an especially insidious lie on college campuses, of which many of you here are college students, where college-age women have abortions at a higher rate than any other age group because of this lie. It's more or less an unspoken understanding, right? Like, don't get pregnant, especially in college, because if you do, you will die, to echo Mean Girls, right? You won't be able to succeed, you won't be able to graduate, you won't be able to get a good career, you won't have any happiness in life whatsoever if you have an unplanned pregnancy. If you don't abort, you're shamed. If you don't abort, you're alienated. If you don't abort, you're seen as a failure. And abortion is pushed as the only way out for high school and college-aged women. How many of you, I know you guys are pro-life students, so you're probably like better than the norm at this statistically, but how many of you actually know a person who is a pregnant or parenting student on campus? Okay, so that's more than a usual room. When I give this talk to mixed crowds, it's like 2 people. I've given this talk at a mixed crowd at the University of Pittsburgh, where, like, I live in Pittsburgh, right? And 2 people in the entire room of like 40 attendees raised their hand, and I was like, is it this person? Who is a friend of mine. And they were like, yeah, it's that person. And she was involved with the pro-life club, so I was like, Okay. Do you know anyone else? And they're like, no. So it's telling that we don't see too many women on college campuses who are pregnant and parenting. I know you guys in Texas especially have done a really great job. I know like Pro-Life Aggies and the Horns for Life have done a really good job of doing that, like the fundraising battle that you guys do. I see that online and I'm like, heck yeah, that's awesome. So you guys are maybe outside the norm a little bit, but great work. That's my point. So the question is, how are these teens or young women responding when faced with a difficult or unplanned pregnancy? When we review the data, we see that of all of the patients having abortions, 12% are under 20, while 33% are between the ages of 20 and 24. So that's a full, 45% of people who are having abortions are under the age of 20 or between the ages of 20 and 24, so 24 and under. College-age women are the most vulnerable to abortion, with teens falling not too far behind. So then we know what the next question should be. What resources are we offering to pregnant and parenting students here on your campuses or at high schools and colleges in your communities to affirm life and promote nonviolence instead of just tacitly accepting the violence of abortion? If you are pro-life feminists, which I hope by the end of this talk you'll be like, yeah, I'm more comfortable with that idea, then you should be working to connect students to these resources. You should be working to break down pregnancy and maternity stigma on your campuses and in your churches, if you're a church-going person, among your peers and among your families. I've often discussed with young people this idea who worry over their parents or how their church will respond or react to their unplanned pregnancy. There are several stories of churches alienating or pushing out young girls who have gotten pregnant outside of wedlock. I'm not sure if you guys heard the story. Y'all are probably involved with student activist groups. You probably know the story. There was the girl up in Virginia who went to a Christian school and got pregnant, was not allowed to walk at her graduation, had to resign from student council, and had to make a public apology to everyone in her school. And she said that the guy didn't go to that school, so he didn't have to make a public apology. But can you imagine if instead she had had an abortion, kept it quiet? She wouldn't have had to do any of that public stuff, wouldn't have had to go through the stigma of being forced to not walk at graduation. There's a friend of mine who went to a Catholic school in the Pittsburgh area. And as a high school student, she got pregnant, decided, of course, to keep her baby. She's a super life-affirming young woman. And she was prohibited from going to Mass with the rest of the school because it would be a scandal to the children if she was seen pregnant. Y'all, just in case it's not clear, whatever your views, whether religiously or secularly, about sexual ethics and sin are, unwed pregnancy is not a sin. The act of being pregnant, the situation of being pregnant, is not sinful. Maybe there was a sin that led to that, but being pregnant itself is not. And so we really need to do our best to remove that pregnancy and maternity stigma that exists in our churches, in our families, among our peers. So I believe that choosing life in our very anti-life, our very anti-woman, our very anti-maternity culture is really a very radical, difficult act when your peers and your church and your school can all stigmatize the heck out of you. So be a witness, all of you, to the value and the dignity of her life and her preborn child's life. Show every person facing a difficult pregnancy compassion, love, and support. And we can do better than the false paradigm that tells us that, that modern feminism, I guess, has told us that women are disempowered by pregnancy. We can love women and their preborn children. We can support them and tear down the patriarchy at the same exact time. We can destroy the paradigm that says that women are less than men, that mothers are inherently disempowered, that pregnancy is a disease condition, and children are problems to be solved. In fact, we can do better by reviving the memory of first-wave feminists and suffragists who understood that violence is not the answer to crisis, that women would never be served by the killing of their preborn children. For example, Susan B. Anthony, anyone heard of her? Yeah, okay. She's on like the old dollar coin? So maybe you've seen her face or something. Yeah. Okay, so she ran a newspaper called The Revolution. And she was best friends with Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They were like BFFs, yeah. And she refused to run ads for what's called Restalism in her newspaper, The Revolution. And running ads for Restalism was actually very lucrative at the time. Anyone heard of Restalism before? No? Okay, so Madame Restel was an abortionist. She would operate fairly surreptitiously, usually in the New York area, to help women have abortions, usually through, again, like some surreptitious means. There are actually some really fascinating ads that you can see like from the suffragist time until probably about the 1940s, where you see ads that are like, help your period to return by doing X, Y, or Z. Y'all, that's an ad for abortion. Not sure if you knew. It's like, oh, are you experiencing amenorrhea? Use this douche, this solution to return your cycle to normal. That's because, of course, women's cycles stop when they get pregnant, right? So it's that sort of thing. But Susan B. Anthony was like, heck no, I'm not gonna allow ads for Restalism in my newspaper for women's rights. She actually ended up going into bankruptcy because she continued printing that newspaper but refused to take the extremely lucrative ads for Restalism. She like died extremely bankrupt. And then of course there's her biffle, right? Her best, oh wait, no, sorry. Biffle, best friend for life, Yeah, you get it. You're gonna use it now? Yes. Okay, so her best friend for life, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was also super against abortion. And she fought pregnancy and maternity stigma by literally announcing that she was with child or that she had given birth with flags waving in her front yard. When at the time, the sort of situation during that era, yeah, there's a fire truck leaving. I hope everyone's okay. So pregnancy and maternity stigma was such that you kind of like, your dresses got maybe like a little bit larger and poofier or something, right, for a time, and then you would go away for a while and you'd come back with like a fresh 2-month-old baby. And you're like, wow, like the stork brought a baby. Like nobody actually believed in the stork thing, but like it was that sort of stigma against pregnancy, against giving birth. Like, so Elizabeth Cady Stanton was like, heck yeah, I'm pregnant. She affirmed the dignity of both mother and child. And she also said, when we consider that women are treated as property, it is degrading to women that we should treat our children as property to be disposed of as we see fit. And Elizabeth Blackwell, who was one of the first female physicians in the nation, responded to hearing of Madame Restel, that abortionist, by saying, "The gross perversion and destruction of motherhood by the abortionist filled me with indignation and awakened active antagonism. That the honorable term female physician should be exclusively applied to those women who carried on this shocking trade seemed to me a horror." Alice Paul was a first-wave feminist. She was legit. She was a suffragist. She helped get the right to vote passed. Unfortunately, Susan B. Anthony did not live to see that day, which is sad, but Alice Paul did. And she, unfortunately, also lived to see the regretful case of Roe v. Wade before her death in 1977. And even though this iconic first-wave feminist was the original author of the Equal Rights Amendment, which is a hot topic in politics right now, something we should definitely talk about, she famously said that abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women, and told the founder of Feminists for Life, Pat Goltz, that first-wave feminists almost unanimously opposed abortion. Speaking of Feminists for Life, many of the second-wave feminists also opposed abortion. There is a continuity of pro-life feminism. There has never been like a break in the existence of pro-life feminists since the first wave. So Pat Goltz, as I mentioned, the founder, was involved with her National Organization for Women's chapter. And in the early 70s, the subject of abortion started coming up, and she spoke up against abortion. She was like, no, we cannot achieve our freedom and our liberation and our success in careers by passing on that oppression and that violence to another human being. And so she got kicked out of her Now chapter, and then was like, fine, I'm gonna start Feminists for Life. And it was great. A contemporary of Pat Goltz, named Mildred Jefferson, was the first Black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School. She was an outspoken advocate for women, minorities, and for preborn children. She said, I am at once a physician, a citizen, and a woman, and I am not willing to stand aside and allow this concept of expendable human lives to turn this great land of ours into just another exclusive reservation where only the perfect, the privileged, and the planned have the right to live. And our contemporary pro-life feminist groups have multiplied. Rehumanize International is one of them. So come check out our stuff at the table. We even have this cute little pamphlet that's like for sidewalk advocacy, because I was sick and tired of seeing pamphlets that were like, are you scared and alone and afraid and totally a damsel in distress? And I made one that has Wonder Woman on it, and she's preggo, and it says, be a hero, save a life. And the first thing that we tell her is like, you are empowered, you are strong, you can do this. We're just here to help you, like navigate the situation. Like, we're just like your sidekick, right? That's all we're here for. So obviously, I've mentioned a lot of pro-life feminists who are women, right? So the question then comes up, is feminism for everyone? A lot of guys think that because it has a word that sounds like feminine in it, that they must not fit. But as Malala Yousafzai recently said, I hesitated in saying, I'm a feminist. But she goes on, I decided there's nothing wrong with calling yourself a feminist. I am a feminist, and we all should be feminists, because feminism is just another word for equality. Malala gets at the root of why feminism is for everyone. The core of the philosophy is the equality of all human beings. And this idea has spread so even now male celebrities like the guy who played Sherlock, Specklyback, something, Batch, something. Right, no, Benedict Cumberbatch. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the guy who was in 500 Days of Summer and like Inception and stuff like that, like him, and Patrick Stewart. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of him. No? Charles Xavier, right? Yeah, he's also on Star Trek, right? Like forever and ever and ever. Yeah, you've heard of him. So like all of them have stood up and said like, I am proud to be a feminist, to call myself a feminist, because feminism is another word for equality. And some people might say, I'm not super comfortable with the word feminist. I identify as egalitarian. I don't think that women should be above men. And there is this misconception in our culture that feminism means like that women should be higher and stronger and like oppress men. And that's because we live in a culture where we have the patriarchy, where the patriarchy has for years oppressed women, deprived them of the right to vote, deprived them of liberty over their own bodies, deprived them of the ability to make a living. And so men think, oh, well, like if women get power, they're gonna do the same exact thing to us. That's not the point. We're shifting paradigms here to one where we see true human equality and no oppression whatsoever. And feminists who understand the core ideal of equality would agree with you. Feminism is not about women being above or greater than men. It is supporting equality for every human being, but also understanding the historical context and ongoing inequality that discriminates against women, and so therefore sees the need to address those structures of inequality in a special way. And I'm definitely not one of those people who's gonna like scream in your face and be like, you need to call yourself a feminist. Like, I'm not like that. Like, my husband is really uncomfortable with using the word feminist personally, except when I do the chant, show me what a pro-life feminist looks like. Okay, next time, guys, next time. So he'll do that chant along with me. But like, he's not super comfortable calling himself a feminist in general because he's like, oh, like there's baggage that comes with that. And like, I don't want to get yelled at. And I'm like, okay, like I'm not gonna yell in your face about that. Like the only thing that really matters to me is that y'all embrace these foundational principles: equality, non-discrimination, and nonviolence. And those of us who have power, who have privilege, should use our voices to bring justice to the disadvantaged. Advocacy is one of the central keys of living feminism out in our daily lives. So this goes for born privilege, right? Like all of us in this room are born. I don't know if anybody's pregnant, but if there was anyone who was pregnant, that preborn child would not have that born privilege. Because in our country, what happens is our rights are not protected until we are born, right? It's like those of us who are born, like it's not legal for you to kill us, right? But it's legal to kill the preborn child, so there's born privilege. And it goes for male privilege. For those of you who are male, use your voices to call for just work environments for working mothers, specifically. So for better maternity and paternity leave, I actually think there's some great policies that have been coming into play around the nation where we're increasing family leave in general. So we're supporting mothers also having the fathers around after birth because, oh my gosh, do you guys know how painful birth is? Oh my gosh. Do you know how much blood? Like, oh my gosh, guys, I'm not sure if you know. Women are often in extreme amounts of pain. They're recovering. Their uterus is going from the size of like a basketball back down to the size of about an orange, and they're getting cramps that entire time. Like, can you imagine having a baby and then just like having to deal for the next month by yourself? Paternity leave is a pro-life issue. And so for those of us who haven't had to face the stigma of being pregnant and parenting students, there's also a privilege that comes with that. So for those of you who aren't in that underprivileged situation, use your privilege to advocate for the pregnant and parenting students on your campus. So advocate for childcare resources, for family housing, for creative solutions to aid in the education of parents with unexpected pregnancies. Lastly, I want to broaden the scope a little bit so that when we talk about pro-life feminism, we aren't just merely talking about being only anti-abortion. Part of the really positive growth, I think, of the modern feminist movement, of this current wave of feminism, has been a focus on intersectionality. Microphone stuck in my boot. Okay. It's this understanding that each of us as human beings is multifaceted, right? Like, you aren't just a woman or just a man. You aren't just Latina or just white or just Black. Like, there's all these different aspects of who we are as individuals that inform how we see the world. I love this idea that's put forth in personalist philosophy that, like, we're full of multitudes. There's an infinite abyss within us that can't fully be contained in words. So, for example, some labels that might define me that cover this intersectionality include things like, I'm Latina, I'm queer, I'm Catholic, I'm female, I am a granddaughter of immigrants, I am middle class, I am born. So who we are and how we see the world is more than one-dimensional. And we know this deep inside, right? That each of us has this unique selfhood. And though it's not contained in labels, intersectionality helps us to see how oppression is complex and how our lives are interwoven. So I want to do a little illustration of like how we experience selfhood. Does anyone here have a significant other? Like a boyfriend, girlfriend? Yeah, okay. In the blue shirt, what's your name? Catherine. What's your significant other's name? Mitchell. Okay, Catherine. Would you be okay if we just like kidnap Mitchell? I don't know where we're gonna take him, but we kidnap him. He's inaccessible to you completely. And we were able to replace Mitchell with another human being, also a man, approximately the same height, same hair color, same eye color, maybe the same ethnic background, maybe the same tone of voice so he can whisper sweet nothings into your ears. And you'll still find that comforting. Would you, maybe he even has like a similar sense of humor, right? Like, would you be okay with that? No. Why? Because it's not Mitchell. There's something that's like untouchable. It's like past those labels or like those little circumstantial factors that exist about us as human beings. It's a je ne sais quoi, right? Like you can't put your finger on it. It's not them. And so this is our selfhood. It's what makes it so you can't just swap out one human being with another. And in the complexity of who we are as humans, in this complexity of our selfhood, we can see that even something like how we are raised can drastically impact how we see the world. And humans, unfortunately, have a habit of seeking power, of creating in-groups and out-groups, of creating the powerful and oppressing the outcast. And though we might like to think that we're all enlightened and holy and good, right? We probably all have some implicit bias, some instinctive, unspoken preference for the in-group. If we are pro-life feminists, we should constantly be seeking to address this implicit bias that exists within our sphere of influence. Acknowledge that bias. Acknowledge the oppression even when it's hard. Acknowledge that even when it throws us out of the in-group to do so, like when I became pro-life at 16 and was like, I've gotta be pro-life now, like lost all my friends, like sometimes that's how it goes, and it sucks. But being in solidarity with the marginalized sometimes means that we also will face a similar oppression. So acknowledge that whether there is violence happening in the abortion clinic against the preborn or harassment happening on social media against LGBT people or immigrants who are facing deportation and dismembered families or children who are caught behind enemy lines suffering under the destruction of drone bombings. Let us be prepared to speak out against injustice wherever we see it. Let us work together to build a world where every human being is respected, valued, and protected. Let us build a movement that is radically inclusive. Let us create a culture that demolishes systemic violence by upholding the dignity of the marginalized and dismantling structures of oppression by creating a world based in equity where all are seen as equally human, with equal dignity and the same shared right to live free from violence. And perhaps you might be saying to yourself, Aimee, I get you. I'm all on board for supporting rights for the preborn, but I'm not totally convinced about this idea of intersectionality and that we need to be fighting for human rights for all human beings, or that we need to use our privilege or to help the oppressed. Or I'm not quite on the same page about this concept of our inherent human equality, or something like that. So I now want to share with you a little video that we made that helps to illustrate why intersectionality is vital, why using our privilege is key, and why we must get past 16-year-old Aimee's vague, nebulous idea of human rights to a holistic idea of human rights based in human equality and authentic love of each and every human being.
What's the story, Morning Glory? Hi friends, it's Maria here. Today, I thought we'd go over a sort of story or thought experiment that could help draw out further discussion on human rights. A lot of times, I think people think of human rights as this vague, nebulous idea, but it's more concrete than that. So today, we're going to hear about the life of Dan. Dan's mom finds out she's pregnant at just 19. She's about 8 weeks from her last menstrual period, and little Danny is just 6 weeks old since his conception date. His heart has been beating for 3 weeks. His eyes, ears, mouth, kidney, and liver are present and growing rapidly, and his first brainwaves are now recordable. Dan's mom is quite poor though. She doesn't want to be pregnant, so she heads to an abortion clinic with plans to end Danny's life. However, a sidewalk counselor is there and is able to reach out to Danny's mom and have a good conversation with her about the local resources that can help. They talk about the dignity of the preborn, and Danny's mom chooses life. She decides to parent him as well. He's born 32 weeks later, happy, healthy, and whole. However, despite all the resources that exist to help Danny and his mom after birth, they still end up living in relative poverty. Danny's mom must work 2 jobs to make ends meet, and Danny struggles in school, both academically and behaviorally. He's a latchkey kid, and he falls in with the wrong crowd. His mom is doing her best, but she just doesn't have enough time in the day to work to put food on the table and help Danny with schoolwork. At 14, he's initiated into a gang. At 19, Dan is caught up in a gang war, and he premeditates getting into a fight to intentionally kill his gang's leaders to usurp power. He kills 3 opposing gang members in the fight. Dan is now facing charges of first-degree murder as an adult. He's convicted and sentenced to capital punishment. He's put on death row, and he's facing his execution after multiple attempts at judicial appeals. The same woman who was outside the abortion clinic to save his life that day 20-something years ago is now pushing for greater use of the death penalty in their state. She believes the justice system needs to represent a balance of harms and believes Dan should be put to death. The actions of the sidewalk counselor seem inconsistent, don't they? Conversely, Dan's mom had a friend who was pushing her to get an abortion back those same 20-something years ago. This friend argued all the typical pro-choice talking points, that it was her body, her choice, the child would grow up in poverty, and that it would be an awful life, but as we know, Danny's mom chose life. Then, when Dan was convicted and put on death row, this same friend was doing everything in her power to save Dan's life. It didn't matter that he was guilty, she opposed the death penalty and needed to save his life. Aren't these actions inconsistent too? The question I want to get at here is, do we love the human beings behind the human rights, or do we just love the idea of human rights? I'm sure you've all had a friend, probably back when you were in high school, who dated around. They had lots of romantic relationships, yet they didn't seem to actually care about their various significant others. This person, you might say, loved the idea of being in love, but didn't actually love the people that they were with. The idea here is similar. The sidewalk counselor loved the idea of human rights when she fought for Danny's life when he was only a 6-week-old fetus. But then she fought for Dan's death 20-something years later when he faced the death penalty. She didn't actually love Dan. Dan's mother's friend just loved the idea of human rights when she did everything in her power to save Dan's life while he was on death row, but she was pushing Danny's mother to kill him while he was still in the womb. She didn't actually love Dan. To truly love the human being behind the human rights, to love Dan, would be to have supported and protected his life in all stages, in all circumstances, while he was in the womb, while he was in his youth, while he was facing violence on the streets as a youth, and while he was on death row. If we love someone, we can only desire their good. We could not wish them harm. If we love someone, we can no more ask that they die by lethal injection by potassium chloride, in the womb or on death row. So here's my question to you. Do you just love the idea of human rights, or do you actually love the humans behind those rights?
Thanks. Our director of creative projects, Maria, did the animation and the voiceover for that, but I wrote the story, so it is a collaborative project. So when we look at Dan's life, I think we can appreciate how the issues of racial justice, economic justice, and reproductive justice all intersect. Because Dan's mom faced reproductive injustice when she chose life but then was unaided in helping to create a sustainable, nonviolent lifestyle for her son. Dan faced economic injustice, growing up poor and without a mother very present because she had to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. And though it wasn't explicitly mentioned, we can infer that Dan faced racial injustice, growing up surrounded by other disenfranchised boys of his race and economic status who suffered systemic issues of redlining, food deserts, police brutality, poverty, and gang violence. Dan was a complex and multifaceted human being. He faced unique trials, and if we honestly love human beings, we understand that we don't just love embryonic them, or fetal them, or toddler them, or child them, or adolescent them, or adult them. We don't just love the black them, or the white them, or the Hispanic them, or the Asian them. We don't just love the poor them, or the rich them, or the middle class them, or the incarcerated them, the guilty them, the innocent them. We love them and care about the difficulties that they face every step of the way. The new movement in feminism is one that I think understands these multifaceted aspects of who we are as human beings. I think that we can take this cultural moment in feminist understanding as an opportunity to bring awareness to the ageism and ableism that is inherent in the violent act of abortion. I think that we can bring about an understanding of the humanity of the preborn in our feminist circles. I think that we can help the newest feminists to see the necessity of adopting a holistic feminism that doesn't leave any humans out. I truly believe that the future of our pro-life movement is feminist, and the future of the feminist movement is pro-life. And I am working passionately to build that future. So how many of you now would say at the end that you're like more comfortable with the idea of pro-life feminism than maybe you were at the beginning of this presentation? Cool. How many of you were cool with it already? Okay, cool. Wonderful. Because I think that being pro-life and feminist is not only doable, but I firmly believe that they go together like almond milk and cereal. I am proud to stand with over 200 years of pro-life feminists who would agree that telling women that we can't be free without abortion is misogyny. And pro-life feminists, we are proud to tell Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry that we are finished with the lie that women aren't free unless babies die. And when you think about it, isn't it really the most progressive of causes? The most progressive of intersectional feminisms to say that no matter your gender identity, age, size, location, ability, sexuality, race, religion, age, or any other circumstance, that every human being deserves equal rights. Every human being deserves to live free from violence. Indeed, though we're often asked how one could be feminist and pro-life, I think that the better question is actually this. When you believe that feminism is based in our human equality, how in the world can anyone be pro-choice and feminist? Thank you.